Hello, this is the Lord's Legion and welcome to the best villains ever, the show in which I talk about a specific villain and talk about their backstories, abilities, greatest feats, and why I love them so much. And I know that this one is a little bit delayed, but truth be told, I needed a little break. And we finally have the first episode of 2018. And so to kick off the year, I thought to myself, you know what, I need to do more video game villains. And a good place to start is of course Kefka Palazzo, who appeared in Final Fantasy VI. So without further ado, let's begin with his backstory, or their lack of. Now when it comes down to Kefka's origin story, he is somewhat of an enigma, because we really don't know too much about his upbringing nor what he was like before his transformation. However, what we do know about Kefka is the fact that he was the very first Magitech Knight who was experimented on. But as you could imagine, at the time the whole experiment wasn't fully defined, and despite how it did actually grant Kefka his magical abilities, at the cost of all that, Kefka was stripped from his humanity, pretty much turning him insane. And since that whole experiment, Kefka has lost the concept of love, compassion, and pretty much anything positive. But instead, Kefka only believes in destruction, chaos, and anarchy. And since Kefka was stripped away from his humanity, he pretty much wants to destroy everything imaginable, as destruction is the only thing that makes Kefka happy. Now looking back on his brief backstory, despite the fact that he's pretty much a narcissist, you could kind of feel sympathy for the guy, because since the entire experiment he just lost the plot. He doesn't understand love or passion, and the worst part about it all is the fact that he doesn't have the ability to understand those concepts. And so the only way for him to even find the slightest bit of comfort is by destroying anything that he can find. And a lot of people do seem to compare Kefka to the Joker, in which the similarities between the two are uncanny. They're both obviously clowns, they both enjoy causing chaos, and also at first glance both of these characters don't really look that intimidating. But in reality, both of these villains are a force of nature. And that's kind of the appeal of Kefka, because when you first see him, he seems like nothing more but a minor threat, but in reality he is the big bad of Final Fantasy VI. And witnessing that transition of the character is just downright shocking. Now it really goes without saying at this point that Kefka does have a lot of powers and abilities at his disposal. For starters, Kefka Palazzo has enhanced strength, speed, durability, reflexes, and endurance. Not to mention he also has genius level intellect. But his main assets are of course his mystical spells. But generally Kefka has elemental manipulation, reality warping, flight, poison related attacks, can also drain people's powers or even life force, as well as telekinesis, and can even cast illusions. Some of his personal techniques are of course his twisty turny blizzaga, which in other words is just his ice balls, as well as lickety split fondaga, which is when Kefka summons his lightning bolts. Another technique that Kefka has is extra crispy fireaga, in which Kefka summons multiple fireballs at once. He also has Ultimate, in which he can summon a powerful magical orb, and he also possesses his Havoc Wings, in which he uses to impale his enemies during battle. Kefka also has the ability of Trine, in which is somewhat of a trap attack, where a bunch of triangles are summoned to home in upon its enemies. He also possesses the ability of Hyperdrive, in which Kefka can summon devastating blasts from within the ground itself. Kefka also has the ability of Forsaken, in which he can shoot out a devastating dark energy ball. And Kefka's most powerful move, only when it comes down to him in his God of Magic form, is of course Light of Judgment, in which the attack itself is so powerful that it can devastate islands. And on top of all of that, Kefka also has Intimidation Factor whenever he shows his true intentions, as well as the fact that he is very unpredictable. He is a master manipulator, and despite his insanity, Kefka surprisingly does have leadership skills as well as a strategic mind. And when it comes down to Kefka and some of the feats that he has achieved, it is rather limited, mainly because Kefka has only really appeared in one game. At least when it comes down to the canon games. But despite how limited some of his feats are, the feats that Kefka did achieve are pretty impressive. And if anything, saying that they are pretty impressive is just a major understatement. For starters, Kefka kills a bunch of Espers in order to absorb more of their magicites, thus making Kefka himself all the more powerful in the process. And plus, Kefka also has a thing with burning things down. as Kefka did burn an entire castle as well as an entire village. But the most sinister of which is the fact that he manipulated terror and making it burn 50 people alive. Kefka also casts an illusion of himself and decides to kill Leo, who was by far one of the strongest soldiers in the Chestalian Empire. Not to mention that Kefka is also capable of neutralizing the Esper's power and ultimately vanishing the Magitech armored soldiers in the process. And as a plus, Kefka did survive getting stabbed by seals, which did actually make Kefka more pissed off than anything else. And shortly after that, Kefka decided to kill his former master, who was of course Emperor Gastal. Kefka also poisoned an entire river just so that he could listen to hundreds of people suffering, and in essence killed countless amounts of people. And as I already previously mentioned, Kefka did actually achieve and becoming the god of magic. And in that said form, Kefka actually achieved something that most villains couldn't even hope to do. And of course, Kefka did successfully destroy the world. And while most villains in pretty much any medium out there always hope that one day they will actually destroy the world, Kefka is one of the rare few who actually does succeed. Now usually at this point of the video I would normally talk about the different versions of the villain that I'm talking about, but when it comes down to Kefka, he only really has one other version, which is in fact the one who appeared in Dissidia. And while the original Kefka from Final Fantasy VI for the most part was portrayed as this narcissistic anarchist, it was really Dissidia that actually painted Kefka in a completely different light, as it was Dissidia that truly made Kefka into a tragic villain. And a lot of people such as myself actually do like this version of Kefka quite a bit because it just makes him all the more layered in that regard. And it's not like Dissidia Kefka is any less psychotic than the one from Final Fantasy VI, but it did showcase a more depressing insight to when it comes down to Kefka's beliefs. And honestly, I actually find that to be quite refreshing. Now many people do declare that Kefka is by far one of the best video game villains of all time, and it's not hard to see why. And the most appealing aspect of Kefka's character is the fact that he's just so unpredictable. Because at first glance, Kefka was nothing more but a goof, but as time went on, we actually got to see Kefka as the sadistic bastard that he really is. And it was really shocking to see how far Kefka could actually go. And the fact that Dissidia made Kefka into somewhat of a tragic villain made him all the more interesting, because it made Kefka into someone who is more than just a crazy man who wanted to destroy everything. But the reasoning behind it is really sad, because Kefka doesn't understand the concept of love or passion. But the true icing on the cake is the fact that Kefka is quite possibly one of, if not the most successful villains in the Final Fantasy series. So because of his truly sadistic actions, as well as his very unpredictable personality, not to mention his very intriguing motivations, and just how memorable he really is as a villain, this is why I personally believe that Kefka Palazzo is one of the best villains of all time. So are you a fan of Kefka Palazzo? And what are some of your personal favourite moments from him in either Final Fantasy VI or Dissidia? Comment below and share some thoughts. And as always, thank you guys for watching this video. Please like and subscribe. Take care and have a good one.